Hello, good day, welcome back. I'm Reverend Philip Onyoko, student in God's Word through Salva Vida Ministries. The series entitled Parables of Jesus in the Gospels. It is basic that the Gospel is talking about the good news, but on the other hand, it's talking about the bad news. What's the bad news? That's our topic. For the hour of His judgment has come. The bad news is God is judging Israel. So there is a consistent New Testament pattern of teaching based on Matthew chapter 13 about the harvest. This pattern shows pretty definitively that the harvest of the Old Covenant kingdom was fulfilled in the first century. Now we are looking at the time of the end, the time of the law of Moses end. The parable of Jesus in the Gospels. I have suggested to you that the parables of Jesus are a pattern. They lay down the foundation for understanding the time of the end of the rest of the Bible. In other words, the end of the Mosaic law in the whole Bible. We have examined the parable of the wheat and the tares, in which can also be called the parable of the harvest. Well, Jesus said that at the end of the age, the Son of Man would come, He would send forth His angels. They would gather out of the kingdom all things that offend. First the tares, then the wheat, and that would occur again at the end of the age. We have examined the prophetic source of that, Daniel chapter 12. We have examined the concept of the end of the age. We have examined how it correlates perfectly in Matthew 24. In our last segment, we look at 1 Corinthians 15. Notice now how Matthew chapter 13 and the parable of the wheat and the tares corresponds with the book of Revelation. This is really fascinating. In Revelation chapter 14, the Apostle John said, "Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people." Look carefully on verse 7. It says, saying with a loud voice, "Fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment has come, and worship Him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water." Verse 8, another angel followed, saying, "Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." Now notice that we have the proclamation of the gospel put into all the world with the announcement that the judgment of Babylon, the time for the judgment of Babylon has arrived. Now notice that in verse 14 and following, "Then I look, and behold, a white cloud, and on the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle." Remember Matthew chapter 3, John the Baptizer talking about the winnowing fork is in his hand, the same sharp sickle in his hand, in the Son of Man's hand. Verse 15, another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, "Trust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe." So he was sat on the cloud, thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. Then another angel came out of the temple, which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, who had the power over fire, and he cried with a loud cry to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, "Thrust in your sickle, sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe." So the angel thrust the sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. Verse 20, and the winepress was trampled outside the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles for 1,600 furlongs. See, what we have here is in graphic detail the imagery of the harvest. Now notice the correlations here. In Matthew chapter 3, John the Baptizer, speaking of Jesus, said the time of the harvest had basically arrived. He said, speaking of Jesus, that he was about to come, that the wrath was about to come. Jesus already had the winnowing fork in his hand. In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus said the harvest would be at the end of the age, at the age of Moses, the Mosaic age, in which he was living in fulfillment of Daniel chapter 12, which says that at the end of time harvest would be when the holy people, Israel, will be completely shattered. In Matthew chapter 24, we have the coming of the Son of Man, the sending forth of the angels to gather together the elect. And Jesus clearly said it will be in his generation. He's talking about the judgment of Jerusalem. Now in Revelation 14, we have the preaching of the gospel into all the world. Oh, which, by the way, Jesus said prior to the fall of Jerusalem, the gospel will be preached into all the world. Then the end will come. In Revelation chapter 14, we have the preaching of the gospel into all the world. The announcement that the judgment of Babylon, who is Babylon? Oh, it is the city where the Lord was slain. That is Jerusalem. As we conclude, therefore, the time had arrived, and then we have the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven and the reaping of the earth. Do we see the perfect correlation? And do we see how Matthew chapter 13 sets the stage? It is the fountain from which all of these passages speak about the impending harvest, the harvest that was to take place at the end of the covenant age, the Mosaic age of Israel. Not at the end of time. It was to be the harvest of the old covenant kingdom, so that the old kingdom would pass away, and the everlasting of the Messianic age, the Messianic kingdom that has no end, will come into full bloom. There's a lot of more. See you next week as we say in Salva Vida Ministries, bringing hope in times of trouble and witnessing God's saving grace. Goodbye.
When the waves of life pull you down and your heart is lost and bound,